It's good to be with you again, everybody. Nice to see you all. I love joining you all, and I'm grateful to be with you virtually, if not in person. Those in-person days will return, but it's good to be with you in this way too. I think many of you know, and Len also mentioned that I work as the executive director of the Shalom Center in Bloomington, which is a resource center and kind of a homeless shelter and a housing provider for people experiencing extreme poverty, especially hunger and homelessness. And we provide food and shelter and jobs and homes to hundreds of people every day and thousands of people every year. We opened over 2 decades ago. Actually, this is our anniversary year right now. We're in our 20th year, just as a tiny room, a small room in the local Methodist church here, and just providing a safe place for people to stay, offering just the most simplest of things, just a place to sit, some phones, a newspaper, maybe some donuts and bagels and things like that, but just very basic small room in this little church. You know, just to give a safe place for people to stay who are often marginalized, who have nowhere else to go, who don't have any safe place to be, especially during the day at that time. Now, over the years, we've grown much larger. You know, we're 2 decades old now, but that little seed of providing safety and welcoming and care and dignity remains the core of our work. It's central to what we do. And because of that, we often work with people who are struggling with all kinds of horrible circumstances and embrace people from many difficult backgrounds and histories. It's not uncommon for us to work with people who others shun, people with severe mental illnesses, criminal backgrounds, severe substance use disorder, chronic illnesses, physical disabilities, and disfigurements, and more. We are an emergency room in many ways, responding to the horrifying tragedy of extreme poverty in America. And because of that work, and because of the stigma and bigotry directed at some of the people we work with, sometimes people don't always say the nicest things to us. And I want to share with you a few actual quotes from the hate mail and messages we sometimes receive directed at us and also at our guests and the people that we serve. You helped ruin the south side of B-Town. Your kind are working on turning Bloomington into a city everyone flees. 10 years and it will be IU people and junkies. You reward destructive behavior, poor decision-making, and zero accountability for actions. It is enabling. I blame Shalom Center and our local government. I'm sure there's money in it for someone. We want a town without hundreds of addicts partying in our parks. If they want to kill themselves by doing drugs, let them. People too lazy to work, but not to steal. Why are all the people released from other counties' jails bused to Bloomington? It's all political and lining pockets with money. You don't really care. Many, many of us hate and despise your organization. You enable deadbeats, bums, junkies, and degenerates to perpetually act as parasites and degrade our quality of life. Expletive you, please close. The please close, I think there is a nice touch there at the end. Suddenly they found their politeness in the midst of that comment. Now, you know, there's this really strange phenomena in our culture where we demonize the most vulnerable among us and attack the most essential human values that motivate us to help. We turn poverty into moral failure. We twist human goodness into human weakness. We wage war on the poor rather than poverty. You know, I was downtown here in Bloomington a few weeks ago and watched one of the most vulnerable people I know asking people for a soda. and over again he asked, and over again he was mostly ignored, basically ignored. And I wondered about that. Here is this man in abject poverty, absolute, utter, extreme poverty, vastly more impoverished than any of the people all around him. And no one who walked by him would have been financially harmed in any way to buy him a soda. And yet everyone turned away from this man. And I also realized that if I had gone out and asked people for a soda, say, hey, I lost my wallet or something, and in my collared shirt and my clean face and my clear eyes and straightish teeth, I would have gotten help relatively quickly. And before this comes across as judgment, that's not what I'm after. I think we've all done this. I didn't buy him that soda in that moment either. It's more for me a collective questioning of how we act together and a wondering why we all collaborate in that silence. What is it about us that we can witness someone in such a hard condition and just pretend like that person isn't there? You know, I think there's something true about most of us. And when we witness that kind of tragedy, when we witness that kind of poverty so upfront and close, when we see a person in that kind of pain, that we actually feel that pain too, that our capacity for empathy actually makes us feel that pain as well, that to witness that also hurts us. I believe that that's true for the vast majority of people. When we see that kind of horror, we actually feel the pain of that circumstance. And then all of us, you know, make choices about how we navigate what we do with that pain. In the midst of feeling that pain, we then all have to make choices about how we deal with that. And it's not a shock to me that many of us deal with that pain by pushing it away, by putting up defenses, by protecting our hearts, even if just for that moment, so we can get down the street to wherever we're going. But I'm also fascinated, and you know, and these are understandable responses. It's not, I'm not trying to judge here. I'm just trying to kind of lay out what I think is happening for many of us. But I'm also fascinated, and this is what does concern me, is what some of us do with that pain full time. You know, what we turn that into. Some of us deal with the pain of poverty by laying the blame of the poverty on the person who is poor, by shifting the blame when we see that pain to the responsibility of that other person, that we take away the pain. Some of us deal with the pain of poverty by telling ourselves and others that help will only make matters worse, that if we were to help this person, we would actually make them less well off. That compassion kills, that it enables bad behavior, that it prevents people from experiencing the pain they need to experience to turn their lives around. You know, I believe that some of us deal with the pain of witnessing poverty by developing a philosophy of care that frees you and me from the responsibility of feeling that pain. If we can make somebody else responsible for that pain, then we don't have to feel that pain or take responsibility for it. And that if poverty is a moral failing, and compassion, human kindness enables that moral weakness, in this philosophy of care, it is actually caring to do nothing. Or worse, it is caring to even further punish people in those circumstances, to degrade them, to hate them, to starve them, to criminalize them, hell, to even murder them, which actually happens at a higher rate than you would think. Homeless people are killed for being homeless at the same rate that transgender people are killed every year. About the same numbers, about 25 people a year are murdered specifically because of their homelessness, which is similar to the number of people who are transgender who are murdered for their transgender, for being transgender. And there's often, honestly, sometimes there's overlap between that. People who are transgender and homelessness are murdered in that circumstance. And so, there is this philosophy of care, and I use that term somewhat lightly here, but there is a philosophy of care in our society, which is centered in fear of the other. It's a philosophy that you get what you deserve. If you're rich, you've earned it. If you're poor, you've earned that too, and you need to work harder. It's your fault. All is well and good, and if you're not well and good, again, it's your fault. There is a philosophy of care in our society built on the premise that I make my own world. Everything I have has come to me because of who I am and what I've done. And the same goes for you. There is a philosophy of care that the world is divided into good and bad people, makers and takers. And you must at all costs protect yourself from the takers, because they will take everything you have. And to say that this philosophy of care is insidious is an understatement. It's everywhere. It's really important, and you and I think, need to understand that some people perceive this philosophy of care as a moral value, and that's perhaps why it's so lasting. By some, it's considered good. This is the way you treat people so that they become better, that they improve their circumstances, that they fix their situation. You treat them poorly, you ignore them, you don't support them, you don't care for them, you don't help them, because that's creating the situation in the first place. And I think it's also something that you and I must recognize, that this value, this philosophy of care, to some level, to some degree, is in all of us, that it has seeds within all of us, and that all of us can subscribe to this particular philosophy of care in different situations. It may arrive, hot and heavy in a serious circumstance, or as a quiet whisper in the night, but it's in each of us, and it emerges when what's important to us, when our lives, our loved ones, our possessions, our peace and quiet, our time, our position, when those things are under threat, that's when this particular philosophy of care emerges. A philosophy of care built on fear is in us. And again, I think it's important to recognize and note, because that philosophy of care, that approach, that experience, that feeling of threat doesn't find healing. It doesn't find change or transformation by ignoring it or fighting it or pretending it's not there. We have to allow ourselves to feel those moments when we feel that way. We have to give it its due. It's there, the breath of fear, whispering, fighting, constricting. It shows up in all different kinds of ways. And it makes us shift the world into good and bad people. This is the safe group, and that's the dangerous group over there. But the beauty of the human condition, the beauty of humanity and humanness, and who we are, is it's not the only thing that's there. It's not the only thing that's in us. It's not the only way we experience the world. It's not our only understanding or relationship to the world. And the greatest of human teachers, and more I come back to the greatest of human teachers to give me hope in these times. There are some extraordinary human beings that have existed throughout time and have shown us the way. They echo a possibility of something different, something better, a philosophy of care centered in love. A philosophy of care that walks into the hurt and the harm and the hate and listens and loves and lifts. Father Gregory Boyle, some of you may know him. He runs a program out in LA for people in gangs and does some employment work with them. And he tells us, here's what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. And Catholic worker activist Dorothy Day, she tells us the gospel takes away our right forever to discriminate between the deserving and undeserving poor. That quote's probably one of the most influential quotes in my life. The gospel takes away our right to discriminate between the deserving and the undeserving poor. You know, and Fred Rogers, our beloved Mr. Rogers, he tells us to look for the helpers. And the Dalai Lama, he tells us compassion is the radicalism of our time. And civil rights activist and Congressman John Lewis, who recently, of course, passed away, says, you are a light. You are the light. Release the need to hate, to harbor division and the enticement of revenge. Hold only love, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. You see, there is a philosophy of care that tells us love is the most important thing on earth, that you are not alone, that you will never be alone, that I am here and that your life matters, that you matter, because it does, because you do. I want to urge of each of you something. Please, please, don't let anyone ever tell you again that your compassion, your kindness, your care does anything but make this world a better place. If there ever was a time when the world needs your love, this is the moment. The world needs you. It needs your compassion. It needs your care. It needs your heart and your mind and your body. Moving forward into the gatherings of people and places, souls and systems that rule our world. Dissolving away what does harm, lifting up what brings love and justice. The greats of the ages have told us as much. There is a love, and it is us. Shalom. Amen. And blessed be.